We are a spiritually courageous people, it says, right up there on our wall as our mission statement. But what does it actually mean to each of us? Certainly being a Unitarian Universalist minister offers an unrelenting opportunity to be spiritually courageous. In a faith in which revelation is not sealed, as James Luther Adams famously said, for me, spiritual courage requires deeply questioning the meaning of life, the existence of any metaphysical reality, exploring many diverse theologies, and being open to transformation. And it also means taking risks. When ministers of traditional Christian faiths take the pulpit on Sundays, they know that they are speaking about a commonly understood God. Now, generally, this is the God of the Christian Jewish tradition as described in the Hebrew and Christian Bible. For the most part, this God is understood to be male, omniscient, omnipotent, loving, but also judgmental. These ministers use the word God freely, with the belief that their parishioners will understand the word in a like-minded way and in a way that has been defined in their denomination. And not just that, but their congregants are actually looking for guidance as to how their God might instruct their living. Not so in a Unitarian Universalist congregation. If I talk about God from the pulpit, I may get any number of emails or comments asking me why I spoke about God at all. And that's because as Unitarian Universalists, we don't share a common understanding of what God implies. For some, you use this word as meaningless at best or confronting at worst. To others, it reminds them of their childhood church where God was synonymous with guilt or sin or shame and condemnation. Now, these people come to us to be free of such a punitive theology. Of course, in any discussion about God, we cannot ignore the violence and abuse that continues in the name of God around the world, which can be enough to have anyone question the usefulness of this concept. For yet other you use, God is precious and a guiding force in their lives. And for some, it's something abstract, an energy force that undergirds their existence. There's so many understandings of God, possibly as many as there are humans on the planet. When Casey Dake, who's sitting in the back there, interviewed many of you in 2013 for a short film about your understanding of God, there were varied definitions. And I'm going to share some of them with you now. God is a metaphor throughout the ages to answer questions about life. God is the feeling part of the cosmos. God changes as we change. God is nature. God is the way life expresses itself. Others said God is a guiding force, a path, an infinite universe, a universal id or ego. God is the collective unconscious, or the power that casts us into existence. Or it's an energy that never dies, found in every living thing. Some thought that God is the source of truth, the spirit of life, the centered place of wholeness shared with the universe, the sense of connectedness between all of us and the universe, and a way of making sense of the cosmos. Many said God is love. Others felt God shouldn't be defined at all or is an outdated, unscientific idea. So as you can see, it's hard to approach our congregation with any unified theological assumptions around God. When I taught the class Building Your Own Theology a few years ago, participants were invited to draw with pencils and crayons their understanding of God when they were young children, then as teens, as young adults, and now. I believe, John, you might have even been there in that class. Most people began with a bearded, older white male looking rather like Santa Claus, sitting in the clouds, either judging or smiling at the people below him on earth. Some imagined the god of Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel. But as their depictions evolved over time, and they in some cases became Unitarian Universalists, that concept changed for many. They either ended up with nothing in their last picture, or some kind of mystical energy that could barely be depicted, which took the form of wispy lines. Surprising to Unitarian Universalists, perhaps, research claims that approximately 90% of Americans believe in some kind of God. 90%. But there's a huge disparity in how this God is understood. None of us know definitively whether there is a God or not, so my hope is that we can be curious about each other's beliefs. Which brings me to the reason that I decided to write this sermon. It seems that God is a word that we avoid in our congregations because we all have such different understandings of it. And this is why you'll often hear UU ministers speak of a God of your understanding, or of the source of life, or light, or love, or the universe, the creator, or source of all. It's a delicate tightrope we walk to be inclusive of those who have a deep love and devotion to God, as well as those to whom that word has no meaning, or indeed has negative connotations. But since we all have such different understandings, I want to encourage our curiosity rather than reactivity to the word God. Are you game? Whether the term appears in a hymn or a reading or a prayer or an anthem, I invite our curiosity for what this might mean for others gathered here, or indeed our capacity to translate it into something that's meaningful to us. This is a religious community, after all. The existence or experience of God is probably the most fundamental and historically significant theological concept that we could discuss. What if being spiritually courageous involved asking people when they use the word God, tell me about the God of your understanding? Or when people declare that they don't believe in God, ask them, I'm curious to find out what kind of God you don't believe in. Because it's different for everyone. Often you will hear that the God people don't believe in is the God of their childhoods, the vengeful, demanding guy with a white beard who rains plagues on people and invites child sacrifice and causes many to go through life riddled with guilt. The problem with the word God is that it reduces the indefinable ultimate mystery to a 3-letter word. Yet if there is a God, it's got to be so much more than our limited human vocabulary can begin to describe or comprehend. The Jewish Kabbalah has a definition of this incomprehensible, indescribable, unnameable energy through a term called Ein Sof, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Ein Sof can be translated as the nameless being, or nothingness, or the endless light. I use the asterisk for the O in the word God, not as an expletive, but rather to honor some Jewish traditions that prefer not to speak or write out the name of God as a sign of respect. Hindus, on the other hand, have 1 million names for the different expressions of God. Buddhism has branches that venerate God and others that don't. And so we go on with the myriad varieties of religious understandings of the divine. Nancy Ellen Abrams, a philosopher, a lawyer, and a lifelong atheist who is married to the famous astrophysicist and cosmologist Joel Primack, is devising a new theory of God. Nancy never believed in God. Instead, she was enthralled by the world and mystery that science uncovers. But her lifelong struggle with being overweight led her to joining Overeaters Anonymous, where she was exposed to the concept of the higher power that 12-step groups invoke. She struggled for years to make sense of that concept as an atheist, but she saw how others were being helped by this higher power idea and were seemingly gaining control over their addictions. So for a while, she translated the concept of this higher power into her wise inner self so it could coexist with her atheism. She would essentially talk from one part of her brain to the other to ask for help. However, once she realized that she was not moving beyond her own psyche for guidance, she continued to feel defeated by her eating disorder. So she gave up on that approach and decided, despite much resistance, to do what others in the group were doing. She acted as if there was some higher power outside of her. And much to her surprise, she found that every time she chose to pray or talk to something beyond her own understanding, beyond herself, that she received strength and guidance around her eating disorder. Suddenly, she would know what the next right step was or how to resist the giant buffet spread before her. What had been a lifelong struggle all of a sudden became manageable. And that this seemed to work came as a complete surprise to her, but it continued to be useful again and again. And eventually this transformational experience led to deep theological inquiry and to developing her groundbreaking theory in a book called A God That Could Be Real. So in conjunction with the latest astrophysics and cosmology, Abrams has come up with a new theology. One that describes God as emergent from humanity's collective unconscious. That somehow God was created by humanity's aspirations and intentions over millennia and exists as a planetary field of energy that we can all tap into. It reminds me of the process theology that I studied in seminary. Process theology essentially says that God is not omniscient or omnipotent, but rather part of all there is, both within and beyond us. God is not a constant, but ever evolving. As we change, God changes. Abram also talks about the great mystery of dark energy and dark matter. Dark energy and matter can't be seen and is both within and around us. And it constitutes 95% of the universe and may hold the key to understanding the cosmos. It makes the universe expand faster and faster. And the scientists among us can probably address this better than I can, but apparently what we can see of the multiverse amounts to less than half of 1% of what's actually out there. Less than half of 1%. Another 4% is atoms and gases. And the rest of the density of the universe consists of dark matter and dark energy, which are invisible because they do not interact with light. And this energy, she says, has spun the galaxies into being and is flinging them away from each other as a universal expansion accelerates. So Abrams asks the big question. Could anything actually exist in the universe as science understands it that is worthy of being called God? The price of a real God, she says, is that we have to consciously let go of what makes it unreal. She suggests that we've attached unnecessary characteristics to God that no one really needs. And Abrams then goes through a process of looking at the traits that humans have attributed to God and removes those that are unbelievable or conflicted with science and the observable universe. I highly recommend this book for offering a groundbreaking theology that may suggest a scientifically palatable understanding of God. Now, I have a confession. Despite being a minister, I don't know definitively what God is. And believe me, I've been exploring for a while. I know when I access an energy that could be God in my life. It's this energy of peace, of joy, of love, and of wonder. An energy that I find abundantly in nature, in the sound of much-needed rain, in a beautiful piece of music, or in the laughter of children, or in the delight of birdsong. An energy I feel sitting in a beautiful cathedral, looking at the light pouring through stained glass windows, or indeed looking through this window and seeing the beautiful trees in the sky, or hearing an organ play, or Joel singing such beautiful music. An energy I experience in a loving touch, or gaze, or while cradling a baby. An energy I perceive when I sit holding the hand of a dying person while I sing a gentle lullaby. An energy I notice when I lose myself in dancing, feeling the aliveness of my body and swaying to rhythms and complex harmonies. An energy I feel when I allow silence in my life and turn towards listening rather than reacting. I have a profound reverence for the mystery of life. There's so much I don't understand and don't know how to explain, and there's so much that's unknown even to the greatest scientists and minds. And that, to me, is where the mystery lies. A mystery that we may never solve as a civilization because it is so beautifully vast and fundamentally unknowable. Albert Einstein wrote, "The most beautiful emotion we can experience is the mystical." In this sense, and in this sense only, I belong to the ranks of devoutly religious men, he writes. I'm so grateful for that mystery. I'm grateful because it is that mystery that gives me hope. Hope that there is so much more we cannot even begin to describe or know about. Every civilization since time began has tried to make sense of that, has tried to explain some system of God or gods that is logical and clear. But both emergent and process theology suggests that God is ever evolving and changing, just as dark matter and energy keep expanding and changing our multiverse. There is no fixed sense of ultimate reality. Just like us, it is ever transforming. So since there's no definitive proof of the existence of God, believing in something beyond the physically apparent is simply a matter of faith or choice. During my first year of seminary, I utterly dismantled my belief in God because of all the theology and philosophy that I was reading. The existence of God simply didn't make any sense to me anymore. And with that, I noticed that I felt a profound sense of loss and grief. Thinking, as I did for a while, that there was nothing beyond this fleshy, earthly existence of ours left me feeling bereft and alone. It was only when I started working as a hospice chaplain, sitting at the bedside of dying people, accompanying them in their final weeks and hours of life, that this paradigm began to shift. I spoke to several chaplains and asked them how they dealt with the suffering that they confronted on a daily basis without some kind of sustaining theology. And they all had different answers, but I remember one that really struck with me. An elder, very experienced chaplain who'd been doing this for years told me, "It's just a choice. I feel happier and more able to do this work when I choose to believe there is something more to this existence, that there is a God of some kind." So from that conversation on, I decided to choose the same thing. Choosing to believe in a greater mystery of existence, in unseen and unimagined energies that I cannot describe, helps me live a more fulfilled and whole life. I choose to believe that I don't know what happens after death, but that there could be something more. Whether or not there actually is immaterial, because it helped me be more comforting to my patients and find greater peace within myself. Ultimately, my friends, it doesn't matter whether we believe in a God or not, except in as far as it feels true to who you are. For me, not supposing there was some greater mystery left me feeling empty and sad. For others, it might leave them feeling relieved and sane. For me, choosing to believe that there is a mystery beyond sciences and my understanding gives me a sense of hope and possibility. It gives my life purpose and meaning and helps me be a better minister. Others might feel a similar sense of hope and comfort from the thought that we only have the here and now, and that we humans alone determine our reality. So what is your sustaining theology? I encourage you to think about it and really come up with what feels right for you. What spiritual questions are you exploring courageously when the answers are not evident? Ultimately, there is no indisputable proof of God's existence or non-existence or what God even is. So I invite us in this community to be spiritually courageous, questioning, and open to multiple understandings of the Word God. That is how we can be most welcoming and inclusive to the diversity in our midst, to Christians, to Jews, to Muslims, to Hindus, Buddhists, and those of other faiths, to atheists, to humanists, to agnostics, existentialists, and theists alike. And because there's no definitive answer, it's not something we need to prove to one another. Nobody has the final word on this. Indeed, we have an opportunity in this community to explore our diverse theologies and walk with one another in our differences. I welcome your thoughts on the subject. Perhaps we could start a discussion on our Facebook page about what this means to you, or have an open gathering one Sunday when we can explore this together. Please know, by the way, that I'm happy to speak with any of you about this further. Just make an appointment with me. If we can celebrate our theological diversity and talk about God more comfortably and courageously together, we will live into our faith's principles and stand for more love in this world. If we can learn to talk about God and perform internal translations when necessary, we will be able to sing and speak the word God in our liturgies, making room for all interpretations. May we inquire about one another's understanding of God. May our curiosity and our open-mindedness lead us closer to each other. And may this fellowship be a beacon of tolerance in this divided world. May this indeed be a spiritually courageous community where we are not afraid to ask the difficult questions and walk together in acceptance and compassion. Do I hear a may it be so? May it be so.